Hey, what's up, Exit the Matrix family? Bob here. Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day. Thank you for joining me on this morning talk. So guys, we're going to pick up with part 2, the theory of human origins. If you haven't heard the first one, you should go check it out. I was just kind of laying the groundwork on a lot of stuff, and we ended with I was talking about my argument for the Anunnaki not being from other planets or galaxies, or that they've come from light years away, but that they are probably more than likely an advanced humanoid race from the Earth that's already been here, and that their elite, called the Council of Anuna, the royal, you always hear people say Anunnaki, oh, it doesn't mean from heaven to earth, it means the princely seed. Well, yeah, princely seed is stating that the Anuna, that they're the royal Anunnaki. They're the royals, the ruling elite, the royal class, the monarchy of their species. And that we were talking about how it would make sense that with high technology, they could have, if there was a massive cataclysm that happened, a pole shift, or, who knows what, asteroid strike, maybe even a civil war amongst them, or, maybe there were more than one advanced civilization. You hear about Lemuria, and in Atlantis, I've heard channelers talk about how they were at war with each other, both advanced civilizations in ancient times. Who knows, folks? But the argument I'm trying to make is that the ruling elite with the high technology, they would be able to ride out the storm, whether they went, may had underwater bases, or they underground bases, or they were able to orbit Earth, or even had, bases on the moon. And that's possible. I mean, we've seen the pictures of the moon, of it, look, structures and stuff. It look like old bases there. And of course the moon itself is an oddity. When they hit it, when NASA did experiments, and they they dropped a lunar module on it, or was it they hit it with a nuke? I know that I could be a little hazy here in my remembrance, but the fact is that they recorded that it resonated like a bell, it's like metallic, like a hollow metallic device. We don't even really truly know what the moon is. I mean, it could be some advanced observatory for the Earth. In the Book of Enoch, it called them the Watchers, the Anunnaki, the Watchers. It's also what brought the changes of Earth's climates, of the vast differences between tundras and deserts and rainforests and different types of biomes. In ancient times, even modern scientists will admit that there was a time when the Earth was covered in kind of a light mist, and generally most of the Earth was the same temperature, like a subtropical, 75 degrees, with kind of a constant moisture, high humidity, but without the storms, and I don't know, it was interesting. That's what allowed for this huge fauna and huge trees and animals, and the so-called dinosaurs and all that, and something happened, and the Earth, its atmosphere got changed. And so, there's always been that theory, what caused that? Was it a comet? That. But anyways, folks, the Anunnaki, they could have been like the Atlanteans or Lemurians that survived, and they would have been the ruling class. They waited out till the dust settled, so to speak, on the Earth, and they stayed away for a while. Maybe they were just continuing to tinker with technologies, and they were, waiting it out, for a while before they came to the surface, or maybe they had a refuge where they all stayed until they were able to build up their numbers more. Because even if they were ferreted away underground for a while, you would have had a lot of people still die and stuff. It's hard to live in those kind of conditions when you're used to living on the surface. And so they could have still had a lot of attrition. So they would have had to work at, keeping their numbers up, and maybe they were building new technologies to cope with the changes that happened on the earth. And when they finally emerged, they were going around the earth finding bands of people. I mean, this is exactly what the Book of Enoch talks about with Thoth, the Atlantean. When he has a spaceship and he goes to Kemet, to ancient Egypt, and he lands, and they all try to attack him with spears, and then he has like this weapon that he holds up, and it can like freeze them in place. So they get scared, and then they start bowing down to him and worshiping him as a god. The cargo cults. Do research on the cargo cults. When the U.S. troops were staying on some of these primitive islands, during World War II, they give these tribes like food rations and other stuff, and this was all new technology to them. These soldiers had walkie-talkies and guns and flying ships. These airplanes, and helicopters, and they'd never seen stuff like that. So these people were like gods to them, right? Remember that movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy, about the Bushman guy? You get the bottle, he finds the Coke bottle and all that, and it's the same kind of paradigm, right? I mean, we live on an earth right now that you have high technology, but you also have people living completely off the land, primitive still. And I know we're doing our best to try to get those people out of their primitive ways, which I think is wrong. Like in the, Brazil and all that, in the Amazon, and, Papua New Guinea and places like that. It's like, I don't understand why we don't isolate these people unless they choose to want to come into the modern world. But, now you see them with, wearing, clothes, and just they're being modernized slowly but surely. They get, they're getting electricity in cell phones now. A lot of these tribes will have at least one cell phone now, and a little like satellite link, and it's like, I get it. In case a disaster happens, the local government can go help them. But it's like, man, these are like the last people that truly know what it's like to live off the land, to live close to, to the land, to nature, and it's like we're always trying to change everything all the time, and it's always for the worse, it seems. But anyways, I've been getting off on a tangent, folks. I gotta refocus here. So anyways, they find survivors, they teach them lost technologies, they start teaching them how to rebuild civilization, they teach them the structures of government and currency, money, banking, exchanging, mercantilism, merchantism, whatever you want to call it, so that way they can start, connecting with other tribes of survivors, and as they're building up new city-states and cause that trade to happen, and everything. And, and then of course, the rulers, they're always worried about protection, but it's usually, so they got armies so they can go take other resources, and they teaching them warfare and how to, build weapons and metallurgy and stuff like that. And this is all talked about in the Book of Enoch, where the Watchers come down, they teach men all these things, not just, everybody always thinks of the Watchers came down and just taught them how to like build weapons and stuff, and that's why God was pissed. No, they were teaching them how to build civilization. If you go back to the Book of Enoch and read it, they were teaching them how to raise, animal husbandry and how to do, raise crops, irrigation, architecture, like all these things that you read about in the cuneiform tablets. So they say that they even say that there's one cuneiform tablet that it's an ancient beer recipe, and it says that the gods gave humans the recipe to make beer. And then in the Book of Enoch, it talks about how they even taught women how to beautify themselves with makeup and stuff. And, it's interesting stuff for sure. And I honestly think that the Book of Enoch was written later on. I mean, it's actually alluded to be, you know, just AD, you know, after Yeshua's passing, and that it was written. But some allude that it could go back BC. I've heard as much possibly as like 500 BC, but I haven't seen any kind of proof on that. But I'm thinking what it was adapted off these cuneiform stories. Same thing. Just looking at the same stories from a different lens and writing the story about it, right? And of course, these primitive man, they worship the Anunnaki, these Atlanteans, as gods. Remember how they called them the Shining Ones? The Elohim, there's different meanings to a lot of these words, Elohim and Anuna and stuff. It's not just one meaning. They have layers of meanings. Well, the Shining Ones is one of the meanings of Elohim, if I remember correctly. And I think they're called the Shining Ones in the Book of Enoch, too. And, well, think about it, folks. They probably had, like, advanced armor, or clothing that shimmered, You always hear about how when people see aliens or they get abducted, they say they have these, like, black shimmering, like, suits and stuff, And, well, imagine these guys coming down in, like, shimmering, in armor from their ships or, shimmering clothes. And you're talking about people that are like basically wearing animal skins and stuff because they've been knocked back into the Stone Age. And these people are carrying advanced weapons and they're flying through the sky. And they're, so they're going to like be depicted as these like gods, and they're shining. Their armor shines in the sun, and they have these chariots of fire, these vimanas, right? They fly around in, and they even battle with each other in the skies. And I mean, it's all in the Vedic text too, folks. The Mahabharata and stuff. It's same stories, man, that you find in the cuneiform, that you find in the Book of Enoch, that you find in the ancient Egypt stuff. So, I think I've hammered that down, folks. Like, look, and look, now we're going to get into the interdimensional aspect of all this, because I told you guys on the last video that I think it's a mix of the interdimensional and of a species that was already here on Earth, advanced, that survived a cataclysm, and they were the ones that went around rebuilding civilization, reteaching technologies, and they were the ones that were depicted as the gods, as the gods of Mount Olympus and stuff. And they were the ones that wanted to be worshipped by humans. All the ancient Sumer, like city-states and stuff back in Mesopotamia then, they would all have a chief god with the ziggurat in the middle of the town of the city-state, and that ziggurat would be dedicated to one of these Sumerian gods, and everybody would worship that god at that ziggurat in the tent. They would bring food offerings and different offerings of their labor, craftsmanship stuff, and gold and valuables, probably gemstones and stuff, and all kinds of different offerings, because they were like altars essentially to these beings. Well, this actually, folks, ties into the interdimensional stuff too. Now, folks, this is going to be a jump. Now, we're jumping the tracks so that you guys can understand. I got to build the framework now for the next part of the interdimensional part of this. Because with a lot of, like, religious people, they just see this just like, oh, they're demons. Oh, they're fallen angels. They don't really have a grasp on what we truly are. They don't have a grasp on what Earth is. They don't have a grasp on other dimensions, or the quantum physics, or any of that. They're just going off what they've been told in Sunday school their whole lives, and they have a very simplified view of spiritual things. They don't understand how the quantum field plays into this, how conscious energy plays into this, what God truly is. Many Christians actually, I'd say all of them pretty much, that at least are faithful to the Bible and such, they honestly see God as a deity sitting on a throne, judging souls, and with angels all around blowing trumpets behind him, and people worshiping at God's feet, that were were good enough, that didn't have enough sins to have to get sent to hell, and they could, or that went to hell, and then they were, or what do the Catholics call that? They purgatory, and then they got out of purgatory and were able to go to heaven, you know. And so all they do is like on their knees singing, you know, worshiping holy, holy, holy to God 24/7 every day, right? Like, wow. I mean, just picture that. It's like a king sitting in a king, you know, like in a king's hall, you know, and he's got his retainers behind him blowing trumpets and stuff, his generals and everything, you know, standing around him, and he's got, you know, court going on with the peasants, you know, and they're all on their knees worshiping him, you know, and begging him for stuff. I mean, that's crazy, dude. Like, but that's how many Christians view God, as a deity, you know, not as the totality of creation, and not as a grand consciousness that encompasses everything, that we are fractals of. You know, we are fractals of that conscious energy, of that. We're sparks of divinity. It doesn't matter what you want to call it. Sparks of source energy. You know, and at the higher dimensions, energy vibrates at a high level, which the highest level of vibration is the pure love vibration. So, you know, I don't think a lot of that goes over the heads of Christians, and a lot of New Agers get all that wrong too, because they're all caught up in these control systems like karma and all this stuff, right? So we're going to really delve into this now, because this is going to start to build the framework behind the interdimensional aspect of this whole thing. Because remember, in the Atra Hasis, it talks about how when the first human avatar was developed and it was given birth to by Ninma, she carried it in her womb, that this being didn't have a soul yet. And a lot of this is alluded to in the tablet Enki and Ninma, when they're tinkering with different human prototypes. So the Anunnaki understood that you need spirit, conscious energy, whatever you want to call it, pure consciousness, to inhabit avatars in this realm, to give them life. You need the spark of source, of divinity, to animate an avatar, a body, a vessel, a human vessel. And they understood this. So what they did to test out this new prototype, to probably test out the functionality of it, the limits of it, the abilities of it, was they sacrificed one of the Anunnaki, one of their own, to, and why would he's actually allows this to happen, which is odd, right? Who would take on this mission? Well, see, the Anunnaki understood that even they were not truly physical beings. Okay? That's why, folks, because they were advanced to the point where they understood that there really is no true physical form. It's all an illusion, but that this dimension's the densest illusion, so to speak, of energy particles that there is. And so they understood that anything created in this realm, this third dimension, it could only operate with the spark of divinity, of source, like this consciousness that permeates everything, that the quantum field is a consciousness grid. Okay, folks? It's an energy. I mean, consciousness is energy too. I want you to understand that. So sometimes you'll hear me say conscious energy, consciousness, pure consciousness, source consciousness. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. Okay. But the point is, the Anunnaki knew this. They understood this, and so this Anunnaki sacrifices himself, and then it even talks about in the tablets how his spirit goes into this avatar, this human avatar, and animates it, gives it life. And now all of a sudden he is a Dapa, okay? Even a lot of people that read the cuneiform kind of they gloss over this part. And this is why Adapa was so advanced, because he was the mind of an Anunnaki. He was already understood the mission that they, what they were doing. And he was testing the limits of the body. So he had the consciousness of this, an Anunnaki that had been here on Earth, that knew all these technologies, that knew what the mission was. And he was now in this human body called Adapa. And that's why he always says how Adapa was so advanced. Anu wanted to meet Adapa because he heard all the stories about Adapa. And of course, Enki tricked Adapa. He told him, don't eat any food my father offers you, And you guys know, right? Anu, the Most High, the God of Heaven, he is El Elyon, you'll find in the Old Testament. Before Yahweh usurps El Elyon, that is. But El Elyon and Yahweh are two different characters in the Bible, for those of you that haven't figured that out. In fact, you would say that El Elyon was a higher rank above Yahweh. Of course, El Elyon was El, the Canaanite god El, and Yahweh was the god Baal, the Lord. That's why in the Bible, all throughout, he's always called the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. Baal, because he is the Lord. He was the Lord commander on earth. This is even in the cuneiform. So understand this, folks. The Anunnaki understood that you need consciousness to animate things created in this realm. Now, of course, there is a consciousness that permeates this whole, that is built this whole construct. All the animals, the plants, everything has consciousness. Everything is conscious energy. Every particle. That's why when they did the double slit experiment, that's why energy particles change their actions, their movement based on consciousness observing them, because they are consciousness also. Those particles, every particle is a particle of consciousness. So this is where you guys, if you guys have not researched into NDEs, you've got to research into NDEs, out-of-body experiences. I've been delving into the Monroe Institute lately. They've been working on this stuff for a long time, the Monroe Institute, and how to do controlled out-of-bodies and mapping the other side, outside of this realm. What was his name? Robert Monroe. He actually he mapped. He did thousands of these out-of-bodies, and he was mapping the other side, and he talked about all these different layers of existence and dimensions outside of, or not, I shouldn't even say outside of this dimension, because everything is kind of on just different frequencies, different, everything's kind of stacked, if that makes sense, right? Like right now, we've got layers of dimensions all around us right now. It's just, we're only tuned in to this small band that is this dimension. Our consciousness is while we're here. And so he goes into all that. Another person I find that is spot on with all of this, that's been doing controlled OBEs for a long time, is a very interesting guy to listen to, is a guy I listen to quite a bit named Darius J. Wright. You can find him on YouTube. He's been doing controlled out-of-body since he was I think he said 13, 14, 15 years old. And he teaches people how to do it. And he's been also mapping the outside. He talks about the different constructs, worlds that you can go to, outside of this realm. And he talks about what we truly are, and that we are not physical beings, that this is just a vessel. And I've done many videos on this, folks, that the human avatar is just a vessel. It's the headset that allows you to tune in your consciousness into this lower dimension, this dense physical-like dimension, and that we are actually multi-dimensional beings, and that this is only a fraction of your consciousness that is experiencing this realm. But see, the Anunnaki understood from that, having one of their own move his spirit into this new avatar from his old avatar, his Anunnaki body. They understood, okay, now we can create these avatars, these humans, but we're going to need sparks of divinity. So they had to set up a system to entice, trick, or invite conscious energy to come experience this realm in these bodies they fashion. And this is a lot of times where you start getting into the Gnostic teachings of the archons. Trapping souls here, and that the body is more like a cell a prison cell, that when you're here, it's trapped in this realm and dimension, until you pass. Then it's released. But then they set up a reincarnation cycle to keep recycling spirits, to keep incarnating back into these bodies, so that way they could keep building up larger and larger amounts of these humans to be their worker class, to do everything they needed to build things here on Earth. But there's a deeper thing to all this, folks. See, the Anunnaki also understood how to feed on energy, how to absorb source energy. And why did they need to do that? Well, they needed to do that because they were a lot longer lived than human beings are. We're like candles. We pop up, we burn hot, and then we burn out quickly, right? But see, they lived for thousands and thousands of years. And when you're in a low dimension for that long, you're in a lower dimension, further from the higher vibrations of the higher levels of source. You're going to be your energy is going to wane after a while, your source energy. And so they wanted to be worshipped. They wanted to use humans as an energy source to feed upon. And prayer energy is very powerful, because when you pray to God, to a higher level dimension, you are building a portal to this lower dimension that allows source energy, higher energy, to portal into this dimension. And that it directly affects the quantum field, because the quantum field is a consciousness grid. And so these Anunnaki, they understood these ziggurats were designed in a way to funnel energy to their altar, where they could feed upon these energies that the humans were praying to them and stuff. This is why religion was so important. That's why they set themselves up as gods, because they needed to feed on the source energy that these new spirits, especially new spirits that weren't caught in this reincarnation cycle, new ones that just came from other dimensions for the first time to Earth, are very powerful spirits, because they haven't been getting fed on here on Earth over and over. They're like a new source. And so, they were, it was like fine wine to them, and that's why it's so important, folks. You don't worship these beings that set themselves up as gods, that set their religions up to be worshipped. And I've told you guys many times that Judaism is worship of this God Enlil, this commander of Earth, the one that brought the flood to wipe out humans, the one that wanted humans to be fashioned as worker slaves. Okay, he's not a good guy. He's a war commander. That's why they call him the Lord of Hosts, Lord of Armies in the Bible, in the Old Testament, because he was a warlord, folks. Okay, not a nice guy. You all over here worshiping to him and stuff. I see these clowns walking around with these hats, Yahweh and stuff on their hats. I mean, these people just don't get it, man. They've all been tricked. They're worshiping an Anunnaki. They're giving him, every time they pray to this guy, he's getting their energy. He's getting stronger. And that's why he's now the chief god, the chief demiurge on Earth, because he's the main god worshipped. And then his son, Nar-Sin, he's been at war with for thousands of years, the moon god, the Sumerian moon god, Nanar, he's the god, the moon god, the Allah, that the Muslims worship. He got his own religion he's getting worshipped to. And of course, we know a lot of the Luciferians, whether they understand who this guy really is or not, a lot of them are worshiping Enki, the serpent, family, Thoth, the Hermetic teachings and all that. But they bastardize a lot of these teachings, whereas Enki was trying to teach humanity about their true divinity, and basically teaching them that the opposite of the lies that his brother Enlil was teaching humans, or wanted humans to believe. He was trying to kind of give them a heads up on what was really going on. And sorry, one second, folks. Got to get my car just right here. Somebody doesn't know how to park here next to me, so I had to adjust my car here to get my car in the best spot I could. So, sorry, I got a little distracted there. What we were talking about, yeah, Enki. That was the whole story about in the Garden of Eden about the serpent, teaching Adam and Eve about the tree of knowledge and all that, and life and death. It's because the God Yahweh walking through the garden was his brother Enlil, and he just wanted these workers to be limited workers. He wanted just slave workers. He didn't want them to know their true divinity, that they were source consciousness incarnated into human bodies. He wanted them to believe in the illusion that they were just worker slaves for these Anunnaki, and that they were to bow down and obey without question and just do what they're told. Because why? Well, because it talks in Natra Hasis tablet about how their worker class, the Agigi, were rebelled against them. They got tired of the labor and getting treated like crap, being slaves. They were like, we're gods too. We know we're source consciousness, and you're treating us all like just slave labor here on this third dimensional world. And they got tired and fed up with it. Okay, and they tried to overthrow the Anunnaki, the Council of Anuna, the royal leadership. That's why humans were created, according to the tablets. And it's funny because the Bible, it even talks about how Adam and Eve are, how they're basically gardeners in the Garden of Eden for God. And he's got them naming plants and taking care of the animals and plants in the garden. And it's a little nicer candy-coated way of saying they were worker slaves for this Yahweh guy, right? Well, Yahweh got infuriated when the serpent, not a snake, the serpent family was the Enki's family. They were called the serpent family. Okay, and they were. That's why it's always like wise like a snake. Well, because the Enki's family, they were scientists and stuff. They were smart. They were intelligent, and God, Yahweh was furious with the fact that Enki was teaching Adam and Eve the truth of what they really are. You don't see a slave. Once a slave knows it's a god, it's no longer going to be a good slave. And so Enlil got furious and kicked them out of the Garden of Eden. And folks, look, I'm telling you, the Old Testament, the Torah, is these ancient stories told from the lens of the cult of Yahweh, from the cult that worshipped Enlil. Okay? To him, he was their chief god. They adored him. He chose them, this group of humans, to be his worshippers and his tribe. And he was a warlord. That's why he had him out conquering, the other Anunnakis, like territories and their peoples and stuff that they were fashioning. And this was going on all around the earth. Okay, they had to set up their own areas. It was almost like Lord of the Rings like type of deal. Mixed with like Game of Thrones and stuff, and throw aliens in the mix. Right, it was in interdimensional stuff. It was really an odd world back then. Not that it isn't still now. It's just everything's kind of hidden behind materialism and stuff, and lies and deceptions and religions and false histories and everything else. So anyways, guys, I gotta leave it there. I hate to leave you kind of on a cliffhanger, but I do got to get into work. We'll pick up part 3 another morning here. This is Saturday. I'll try to get this uploaded. I'm trying to get back into the regular swing of videos, folks. I've had so much going on, man. I am excited to, you guys know I do a lot of gemstone hunting also. I am getting ready to launch a new Etsy store. I'll have the links to this to YouTube, my YouTube channel, and in the comments, and to my Facebook page. I'm going to be offering these powerful talismans, jewelry that I've been making that are pure rhodolite, purple garnet, rare garnet necklaces of pure river tumbled clear crystal purple garnets. They're beautiful, and I'm going to start offering those as a way to folks, money's not easy right now, right? And I've been collecting these for a long time, and I just have jars and jars of these, and I might as well start offering these to people. They're very powerful. They're really heavy for one. Garnets are very dense and heavy, so the necklace weighs on you heavy, and it sits right over your heart area. And the amazing thing about purple garnets is that, like red garnets, the iron based garnets, they're a powerful heart chakra, gem crystal. But rhodolites, because of the rhodium in them, the purple hue, they actually are they act as a conduction point between the heart chakra and the crown chakra. The crown chakra is the purple chakra, right? And because they kind of have a leg in both worlds, and they do have some iron in them also, so they're they connect the heart and the crown chakra. So they're very powerful to pray with, to meditate with. The first time you wear them though, it's going to freak you out because you actually feel their presence. It's really odd. I don't know how to explain it. The first like 2 times I wore the first necklace I made, it freaked my wife out too because she's empathic. Used to be a Reiki master. She hasn't really been practicing for a while, but she's still got those energies and understandings, right? Well, you could feel these things physically affect your body. Like it does get your heart to beat a little faster and stuff. It's probably because it's realigning your heart chakra and stuff, but it kind of freaks you out. It freaked me out. I was like, whoa, because I've never felt a crystal, folks, that has a direct physical effect on you. But these things are. But your body attunes to them, and then after wearing them for a while, and the nice thing is, you can use them for meditation for all kinds of stuff, and they're cool looking. I mean, they're beautiful. It's not often you see purple crystals. Purple, natural purple gemstones like that, and so I'm going to be offering those soon. I already have a bunch of them made. I'm just finishing getting my Etsy store set up. I'll start getting pictures and videos of them put together, and I'll be able to start offering them here, I'd say, within the next few days. With Mother's Day this weekend, I'm probably not going to get it done this weekend. It'll probably be early next week, but that is on the way for those of you that'd be interested in how to support the channel, the page, the movement of Exit the Matrix, and also to get you something, a powerful talisman that you can utilize, and that's beautiful to wear, and that it's great for spiritual things. So anyways, guys, hey, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you for part 3 of the theory of our human origins.